205 GTi is a perfect vehicle, I think, in terms of updates in GT7 to divide the age and the experience of the fandom. Because you can tell the people who are maybe a bit younger, they haven't driven cars like this in many games, maybe they've just been more familiar with modern hot hatches like Focus RSs and Golf R32s and that kind of stuff, A45 AMGs, and maybe being less familiar with these quote-unquote old cars, they just don't really get why people would want it in the game. And maybe even if you are familiar, you might say, well, why not have the 205 T16? Seems to make more sense. As I said in the silhouette stage of this update, it would have made more sense initially to be a rival, as the rally car is, to the Renault 5 Maxi Turbo, or the Renault 5 Turbo Road version. And of course we are due, technically, to get the rally version of the Renault. We already have the rally version of the Peugeot, so you could kind of add all four in a mix and match kind of way. Now maybe they will still do that, but for now they added the GTi 1.9 instead, which has nowhere near the horsepower. It's actually very lightweight, which is a great advantage. It's front wheel drive, of course, instead of four-wheel drive, front engine instead of mid. A far easier car to find on the market, and certainly when it was new, far easier to find. The downside, I guess, is it's not worth like £200,000 or £300,000 these days like the 205 T16 is. The reality is, this car is great. It's so much fun as long as you go into it not expecting the world. It's a 128 horsepower car with 875 kilos of weight. It's under 400 points, and although 60 grand seems kind of ridiculous for a Peugeot 205, you do have to remember, of course, that this is Gran Turismo 7 we're talking about, and all of the prices, for the most part, are kind of ridiculous. In the case of how this car actually performs, well, I've driven it in standard form in the initial update review, of course, on Thursday. I've driven it here on the dirt, and more recently, even after recording this footage, this exact same build but with sports tyres instead of dirt tyres. I jumped out onto the new seasonal event for the Peugeot 205 and gave it a run there as well, so it's a pretty well-rounded build. I'm not going to give away what I've actually done because it might come up as a future special project. The funny thing about this car is, though, it doesn't really matter if you love it or not. If you don't think it's that interesting, if it's just some little old classic car that's kind of slow, well then you have all the more room to be surprised by how good it actually can be, especially for lower point level events and lower horsepower levels. But if you are a fan of it, maybe if you grew up in that era, which I must admit is before my time, but even so, I recognise why people love stuff like this so much, well then you already have all of that nostalgia helping you to love the car even more, kind of like the Whaletail Escort Cosworth and the 190E and the E30 M3. In terms of building up the car, of course you can drop the weight even more. You can put a really nice visual modification kit on it to make it look like a Peugeot 205 Rally, such as this one is here. And in the case of how it feels, how it drives, how it performs on and off-road, I will actually say I like it more off-road. It handles well enough on the road, and standard it's great against other standard classics, but it really is on the dirt where this car comes into its own. And it's funny because you'd expect that from the 205 T16, but maybe this one not so much. Sure, it could be good off-road, but it's surprising just how good it actually is. And you can see here in the event, it is flying through corners, and it has almost no understeer, which you would typically expect from a front-wheel drive car, which is a nice advantage to have. In fact, the funny thing is, on the dirt, for some strange reason, this car, perhaps more than anything else in the game, reminds me of how much fun my own Daihatsu is in real life, the Rally 2. I've never actually taken it off-road, and yet something about this car off-road feels kind of like how fun that car is on-road, if that makes sense. And I guess the spec isn't too far off between those two cars. The great thing about this car is then, whether you come at it from a point of nostalgia with that bolstering the car, or if you come at it from the point of not really caring, thinking it's some boring boxy little old jalopy, either way you'll be either pleasantly surprised or super happy that the vehicle's finally here. I do still find it a little bit of a strange choice to add it maybe before the 205 T16, and I do think the T16 would have probably been even better received by many players. If you imagine, for example, this update were with the 205 T16, the Unimog and the Z4, maybe even a Z4M Coupe, well, I think for many people they'd probably enjoy it even more than they already are. I am kind of surprised, to be honest, that we've never had a 205 GTi before. It does seem like a fairly obvious vehicle to go for. Then again, if you think about it, we haven't had the normal version of the Renault 5 either, which is one of its most natural rivals. This one I think is a good addition, and like I said, it's not like most people are expecting the world from this thing anyway. There is only one car left though to talk about in this update, which of course is the Beamer. That'll be tomorrow, the Z4 3-litre-i, which has some very cool visual upgrades. If this is the first video you're watching out of the update, I did of course talk about the Unimog yesterday, which is of course the standout, completely overshadows the other two, both literally and figuratively, and of course I'll see you tomorrow for the next review. But for now, thanks for watching.